Leading off our discussion tonight, Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama. He's an MSNBC political analyst. His new book is After the Fall, Being American in the World We've Made. Ravi Perry is a professor and chair of Howard University's Department of Political Science. Ben Collins is a senior reporter at NBC News, whom I joke dwells in the underbelly of the Internet. Rhodes, I want to just show you a poll from Politico and Morning Consult. This was taken in June about Donald Trump. You know, today they're calling it the day of the reinstatement when Donald Trump was supposed to be reinstated. They're looking at whether or not the country's going in the right or wrong track. 29% said very or somewhat likely. I think this is the wrong question. I'm going to take this off. I'll just ask you something else. I think this graphic might be incorrect. There are a lot of Republicans, about 30% of Republicans, who actually think Donald Trump might come back into office. There's no, you know, he might run again in 2024, but that's not what the question's about. How do you capture them? How do you get into their world and sort of say, I understand you're conservative for a lot of interesting reasons. You might like smaller government. You might want lower taxes, all this kind of stuff. But how do you get them into a normal conversation and get them away from this idea that there's going to be a reinstatement, that there was widespread fraud in the election? Republicans are not guiding them back to this conversation. Is there any room for Democrats to do so?
I think, Ali, we have to recognize that it's incredibly difficult. The example I'd give is that when we were in the White House, there were polls time and again that showed that a majority of Republicans believed the birther conspiracy theory, the racist birther conspiracy theory, that Barack Obama was not born in the United States. Far too much of the mainstream political media kind of treated that as almost a comical aberration. No, they really believed that. And that's how you got Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee, and that's how he ultimately became president. I think what we have to understand is there have to be policy responses to these things over time. So, for instance, again, how does something that, as Ben rightly said, was once in the Weekly World News in a supermarket tabloid, how is that reaching 30 to 40% of Americans? It's because social media algorithms are written to prioritize sensationalist information that triggers people, that triggers their emotion. There's going to have to be a conversation about regulation of how those algorithms are written so that you're not mainlining conspiracy theories and disinformation to people. That services an agenda where, let's be blunt, as we've been talking about the census, what's happening here is the Republican Party cannot win a popular election in this country. They haven't since 2004 when George W. Bush was elected. They're trying to entrench minority rule of a majority, and they're using disinformation and conspiracy theories to mobilize their base sufficiently to be able to do that. And here's the thing, it could work. It works in other countries. And so unless we have a policy response that gets our arms around how you get, there's always going to be a segment of the population that believes crazy things. The question is, how do you shrink that from it being 40 to 45% down to a number of people that is manageable and is not derailing our democracy? So to me, yes, we have to show up in places. Yes, we have to make our case. Yes, you have to go into rural parts of this country and try to make the case to people about what is facts on things like vaccines. But ultimately, if you're facilitating literally the dissemination and mainlining of conspiracy theories to people, there's only so much you can do, and we have to recognize that. So I'd like to see the mainstream media treat this more seriously and not treat like Republican lies as somehow of equal value to people like me who might be wrong about the size of government or taxation, right, but at least live on planet Earth. And how are we getting our arms around the tools and technologies that are making this mass mobilization and scaling up of disinformation possible?
So, Professor Perry, the thing is that people look at the census report and they think of the Browning of America. They think of the people who formed the Democratic coalition and think it's all going to be okay. But in fact, it's the opposite of okay, because gerrymandering, redistricting is going to begin, and Republicans control far more districts or far more states in which there's redistricting than Democrats do. So rather than the country looking more like rather than Washington looking more like what the country looks like right now, we will actually see in the next election it looking less so.
You're absolutely right. And that is because we have in America a problem, frankly, in voting in our local and state election. It is state representatives and state senators that draw congressional district lines, and the Republican Party controls most governor's mansions and most state legislatures. So, yes, they are going to gerrymander, racially gerrymander, partisan gerrymander the districts that work in their favor. And, of course, if you are a part of that Browning of America coalition, it's very likely that those districts are not going to cater to your interests when it comes to policy that congressional members actually put forth. And so the challenge for all of us is to make sure that the disinformation actually is mitigated. I actually think it is working. It's already worked. It's worked primarily because those same state legislatures and those same governors of most of the states also have fought very hard to ensure that we are no longer teaching civics. We're no longer teaching ethnic studies. We can't talk about women. We can't talk about gender. We can't talk about sexuality. We can't do any of these things in K through 12 education. So we have generations of people now who simply don't know their own power, the power that the Constitution gives them in terms of their citizenship rights to exercise their freedoms in this country via the ballot box. And we have to return to the importance of education and perhaps mandating civic education and ethnic studies and global history and affairs so that people can understand the world around them and then vote their interest accordingly.
Ben Collins, people did believe, a lot of people did believe this reinstatement day thing. It was silly because it meant Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would resign, and somehow instead of the normal course of people who, you know, the line of succession, somehow Donald Trump would be reinstated as president of the United States. What are those folks thinking on a day like this? Friday the 13th has come and gone, and unless this happens in the next hour and a half, it's game over.
Yeah, look, these people are getting more and more desperate. That is always the worry with this sort of thing. I will say that, you know, there in the days before this, people had already moved the date back because they realized it was just Mike Lindell saying this. And Mike Lindell, even among the most diehard QAnon Trump supporters, is losing a lot of esteem recently. So they realized that it was just him saying this. There was nobody in Trump's orbit actually saying this. But the dog whistle is still out there, you know. Donald Trump is still sort of dog whistling that he's going to be reinstated somehow, saying, you know, he might come back sooner than 2024 or something like that. The worry is not that sort of thing. The worry is the violence when people get desperate. You're already seeing it with QAnon supporters. You could see it with others very soon.